Okay, let me find my slide deck. Okay, there we are. So what I'm going to do is basically tell you my life story, pretty much. So, I'm going to start with, why did I get into VO2 max testing? It all started with me going to the doctor's office for my physical and discovering that I had blood pressure that was beginning to rise above 120/80. So I think it was 120/85 at that point. And this was a bit scary because my dad had 3 heart attacks before he turned 50. So I'd seen him in my 8th grade have his first heart attack, and that still remains embedded in my head. So, and I knew that there was stuff that's coming down the line that I didn't want to particularly see. So it was time to take action. Now I knew I was reactive. I built a fitness app early days with the iPhone that used the accelerometer to track activity, right? So I was tracking my activity, but all the activity didn't seem to necessarily improve my health to the extent that I wanted to be. So I dug into the science a little bit personally, and so the first thing, there's a bunch of things that I learned, and the first thing that I learned was that activity and fitness are not necessarily tightly correlated, right? So we saw the chart that showed how cardiovascular risk declines with increasing physical activity and physical fitness. Part of the reason why those two are disconnected is because being active is not the same as being fit. There's only about a 21% correlation when you measure activity is the amount of time you're spending being active, right? There's only a 21% correlation. And I'll come to some of the data later. And so that's one of the first lessons. Second lesson was if you want to improve your fitness, you've got to actually measure it. And so, so that's when I went into kind of learning about the science. I could have gone to the lab and spent $150 with Tim, but I wanted something that I could use regularly. I knew my fitness wasn't great. I wanted to get a baseline, and I wanted to be able to track and see how it progressed as I changed how I exercise, right? And I wanted to change my exercise regime and then see the impact on my physiology. Now there are a bunch of alternatives out there, right? And so there are cheaper, testing kits. So Core is a company that's on, it has a treadmill that's about $9,000 versus PowerMedics, which is anywhere from about $24,000 to $45,000. That's the equipment that Tim uses, for example. PowerMedics is gold standard. That's what you'd see in Access Physiology Lab. That's what athletes would use. Core is available in a bunch of different gyms, and now they're trying to get it more commercially adopted, right? Still requires a face mask, of course. May not be cheap enough for kind of widespread adoption. And I haven't seen too much studies. They've done an N of 5 versus PowerMedics, so there's still data kind of emerging on that. Lots of different devices now, wearables that do allow you to get a VO2 max measurement. Fitbit has one, Garmin has had one for a while, Polar has one, Apple Watch has one now too. So there's a whole bunch of devices now that can give you an estimate of your VO2 max, right? All of them, fundamentally use very similar, principles. They look at how much energy you're producing, and they look at the heart rate at that energy level. And energy is usually measured from either GPS or sometimes accelerometer, but usually it's the GPS, which is, will give you a more precise idea of how much output you're producing at that point. And then they make some assumptions about your max heart rate, and then they extrapolate to get your VO2 max, so they get your max output, etc. Now, essentially, therefore, a number of these methods rely on how accurate your max heart rate is. So, First Speed, which is kind of a Finnish company that actually licensed out the technology to Polar, to Garmin, and a few others, will tell you pretty straightforward that, hey, when you get the max heart rate right, the estimate is great. If not, then it doesn't work quite as well. And max heart rate, tends to change quite a bit as we age. So it's much more predictable when you're young. It's less predictable as we age. There's much more variation in terms of max heart rate, right? Things like having, taking statins and other medication will affect your max heart rate. They affect the shape of your heart rate response to stress overall. So therefore, there's much less predictability for those populations, right? And of course, they don't tell you anything beyond just giving you a number. They don't tell you, how to train to be able to improve your VO2 max. The last one, actually, something I actually quite like, and I've tried a few times, is you can go online and you can just input a lot of data. In fact, this particular one, which was set up by, I think, a Danish, Dutch university, I forget if it's Dutch or Danish, but it's actually a pretty large sample size. And they give you a reasonably good estimate if you're able to provide reasonably reliable inputs, right? And so you can put in, you can answer all the questions and you get like a VO2 max estimate. Challenge, of course, is that it's input dependent. So if you change, how active you are, the number is going to change. It may not really reflect what's happening at a physiological level. So it's a good. It gives you an idea, but if you don't exercise and you don't want to do a test, this is probably the best solution for getting a VO2 max. In which case, of course, what that number will be is a bit questionable. So that's essentially was the genesis of Revvo, to build something that was close to the lab, but it's still easy to use, and it is something that perhaps everyone could do, right? And so there are three things that measures primarily: VO2 max, recovery, which is also independently interesting, and measures what they're performing at peak, and then endurance, right? And so the approach we take is, so we don't use the face mask, right? And essentially we're capturing two inputs. One is energy expenditure measured in watts directly on the bike, right? And then heart rate tracked simultaneously. And the core to Revvo's innovation is that it's an intermittent testing protocol, right? So which means that you're cycling for 30 seconds, it stops completely for 30 seconds, then you cycle at a higher target for 30 seconds. It starts off really gentle, and that again is core to the innovation, and then you progressively ramp up until you max out. So it's still a max test predominantly, unless you have a health issue, in which case we can't do a max test for you. But for most people who don't have health issues, it's a max test. When you finish, we're directly measuring the max output that you produce on the bike, right? In this case, 424 watts. We're also directly measuring the max heart rate, so we don't make any assumptions about that, right? And then, because this is an intermittent protocol, we have a much richer data set around heart rate response to stress, right? So we can look at rate of change, rate of increase, rate of decline, right? And lag and increase and decline, and a whole bunch of metrics that would not be available if that test was continuous. So if you look at a continuous test and look at the heart rate response, you won't see this up and down pattern because your heart rate is going to change, and at some point there'll be an inflection, but it's a pretty straight line, right? And so the key to our innovation is being able to get a much richer data set in terms of heart rate, and that allows us to detect, detect is how I talk about it. And, we're not trying to get a precise measurement, we're trying to detect where your thresholds are. So we detect roughly where the fat max is, where the threshold is in terms of your lag rate threshold, and when you finish, what Revvo tries to do is get estimate of how much of that max output is aerobic, and that's how we get to VO2 max. So it's an indirect measure of VO2 max, basically. I'm just going to do a quick demo and then get away from, Revvo, so to speak, because that wasn't necessarily the purpose, but this will give you. You play music too. So the goal is to make it a little bit fun. It tells you exactly what to do. It is. A lot of energy is actually focused on helping people make sense of the data because, as you can imagine just from this conversation, this is complex, right? And so a lot of what we want to do is to simplify this for someone who's not an athlete, who's not an exercise physiologist, but they allow that individual still to get insight that's relevant for them in terms of their goals, right? And so that's, all I can say is we've just started the journey there. There's still so much learning to do. So that's the output you see, and so it kind of gives you a visual summary. You get a sense of strengths and weaknesses. A large part of success is focus. So I think a lot of what Tim was talking about is really trying to find the thing you need to focus on, right? So if you're trying to be an endurance athlete, you need to be able to change your metabolism, so you're burning fat at high intensities. Your threshold lifts up, right? You have a better engine, and so you're able to kind of produce that the output you need. If you're trying to be just generally fit and healthy, then you may not need to worry about endurance so much. Maybe it's VO2 max. A lot of cases you find people who are perfect in terms of BMI. Actually, this is a very classic. About 60% of our user base falls into this profile. BMI is fine. The issue is the engine size, right? And so people haven't done enough activity to really give themselves a cardiovascular challenge, right? That would actually push their VO2 max up. And so the first, goal is to help people find where they should focus on. Second goal is then to help them understand how to improve it. So that's kind of the second part of what Revvo does. This is some of our early results. Much of our work was done at endurance testing with Tim. Some of our work was done in Johnston in Boston, which is where we had like a big spread of people. Essentially about 90 subjects, so it's still pretty early data, and we see a 97% correlation versus lab. What I really like about where we are, I think, is that we're able to kind of seem to be able to get a good estimate across a pretty wide spectrum of fitness levels. So most of the estimation formulas that you'll see published with FirstMeet, for example, is all on 20-year-old men and women out of college. So there's a very specific population, generally relatively active and fit, whereas we are working with a very wide spectrum in terms of age, very wide spectrum in terms of fitness level, all the way from people who are pretty high cardiovascular risk at 18 to 72, which is kind of borderline elite athletes, so competitive athletes at least. So our goal was always to make this something that would work across a very wide spectrum of people. Right? When I did my first fitness test on Revvo, so not too long ago, a few years back, my VO2 max was 30. So that's essentially where it was, and it started to all make sense actually. Now I knew what the problem was, right? Because 31 or below is where you start to see a lot of the correlation with things like blood pressure and type 2 diabetes. So my blood pressure numbers started to make sense. My activity data didn't actually explain my blood pressure numbers, my VO2 max data did. And so it gave me a sense of what I needed to do, right? And so that made me less fit than the average 60-year-old male. So I wasn't 60 years yet. I'm not 60 yet. So so that is also not particularly exciting. And so after a lot of experimentation, so my improvement in VO2 max didn't come immediately. And I'm not going to walk through all the slides, but essentially I tried a bunch of things, and a lot of it was more continuous work. I didn't really change it. It's only when I started to train closer to my personal max that I started to see improvement. So the protocol looks something like this: 30 seconds. At that point, my max was somewhere just over 250 watts, so it is not very high capacity actually, even in absolute terms. And I was doing 30 seconds at about just below that, recover, and then 6 to 8 times a session, right? And so for 6 months, but prior to that, it hadn't changed because I was doing more, longer, 1 minute to 2 minute intervals. That didn't really make a difference. But once I started getting it right, training close to my max, getting 30 second intervals in, the change started to happen. And you'll notice the yellow line starts to move pretty quickly. So within about a few weeks, I saw like an 8% increase in my blood pressure number, which is very interesting. So it's almost like an inverse correlation between the two that I've seen, since then. Right? And today, my VO2 max, the most recent metric from last week, is about 52. So it makes me fitter than the average 20-year-old. So that's the way I think about it. It makes me happy. I'm not 20 years yet. And borderline athletic. I kind of define what athlete is, but this is based on good published benchmarks. So I think some of the questions kind of that came out here. This is something that you can actually change. Obviously, if you're an elite athlete or pro athlete who've been training at the peak of your capacity for years on end, you won't see much change, right? Unless you kind of literally poke yourself with EPO, which is what Lance Armstrong ended up doing. But if you're anywhere below that, right, change is possible, and you have to get the training right, and you have to provide the right stimulus, and you have to keep adapting constantly. So I had to solve a number of things. I had to solve nutrition as well. I'm a vegetarian, and as a vegetarian, so going back to some of the conversation, I found that my iron levels were actually dipping a little bit low when I went for my labs, right? And which means that you have to think about iron, because iron is the transport mechanism by which oxygen goes to your, circulates to your system. So I had to actively eat better for my VO2 max numbers to start then growing back, even with training. So training after a point is not as effective if you're not eating right. So for each of us, there's going to be kind of steps in that journey that you got to figure out, but it's doable. So a quick summary of there's actually enough that we've done about close to 1,000 tests actually. We're learning a lot about some of the correlations, big picture between these data sets, and a lot of our learning now is at a cross-sectional level, looking at these different fitness metrics, but also looking dynamically how these things change on a day-to-day basis as people change things like stress and sleep and etc., which we still haven't actually had a chance to publish, but we're starting with kind of more of the cross-sectional data. And there's more out there on my blog, so hack.fitness, and if you follow that, you'll see more updates coming up. But just a few key kind of highlights. The first thing, most of the population that I'm talking to are kind of general population interested in health and wellness, not necessarily athletes, right? And I think one of the fundamental issues that I see in kind of general population is the tendency to mix up weight and fitness. So how you look is how we judge whether people are fit or not, right? And this is kind of true for a lot of, just conversationally, being in shape, right, is how we talk about it. What we're finding is that there is a correlation between your VO2 max level and your weight, and this is VO2 max with weight being the denominator, right? So there is correlation, and that correlation is very strong once you cross 250 to 300 pounds, right? So if you're very heavy, morbidly obese to obese, then it's very difficult to be fit. You have to be like literally Superman or maybe an NFL star to have pretty high capacity. But below the 200 pounds range, there is a huge variation in your VO2 max level. So you really can't tell if that person is fit by looking at them, right? You just can't. So you have to actually figure out how fit they are by having some way of judging it outside of looking at their weight. Second thing, and I think this is still, I think the science of this is pretty strong now, but it's still not something that's probably seeped into kind of the broader consciousness, which is being more active doesn't necessarily lead to weight loss, right? Weight loss is a multifactorial thing, right? And if anything, a lot of times people being more active end up, consuming more food because you have to you will find a craving, you'll end up eating more. So there's a very weak correlation between how active you are in your actual weight. And the same thing happens when you plot it as BMI as well, right? So there's a slightly better, tighter connection, but it's exactly the same thing. So there's a very weak correlation between increasing activity at a big picture level and your weight. Where there is a stronger correlation is when you plot activity versus VO2 max. So then you see like 21% correlation. So in general, this goes up. And in general, we can say if you're inactive, you're going to be unfit. So at least we can say conclusively that if you're sitting around the couch the whole day, your VO2 max level, so this top left quadrant is basically less active and it's going to be below average, basically, right? But again, even here, increasing activity level doesn't necessarily translate automatically into an increase in your VO2 max score, because as you'll see, as you kind of go above kind of the moderately active to the very active individuals, there's a huge variation in their VO2 max levels, right? And you can have people like me who is like relatively active but not really very fit, right? And so that's the bottom right quadrant. Part of it is genetic. So we know about 30 to 40% of what constitutes your VO2 max score is probably genetically influenced, right? Some of it is the quality of the work you do, right? So just being active is not necessarily going to translate into improvement to VO2 max. Some of it is nutrition, right? And so there's a whole bunch of other things that you need to think about that prevent this thing from translating into your activity and translating to fitness. So from my perspective, I think the important lesson from this is that you want to measure the thing that you want to improve directly, right? Don't rely on activity to tell you if you're fit. Find a way to measure it yourself. Any questions? Great. So just a couple of last slides kind of summarizing why I think that this is important kind of here. So today, I think 2012, 2013, for the first time in humanity, since the dawn of humanity, we saw lifestyle diseases overtake infectious and other reasons as the leading cause of mortality. And heart disease is the #1 killer globally, not just in the United States, everywhere. And from what we can see, right, the 10% increase in VO2 max leads to a 15% reduction in the risk of you having a heart attack, which is probably as good or better than the best available drug today in terms of the effect on heart risk. So in a larger sense, what we're trying to do here is to literally take a shot at solving the single biggest problem that faces us, right? So if we can get a large group of people to appreciate the value of testing, we can get them to train in a way that's more smarter so they can actually see these improvements. And kind of going back to this chart, see this like radical drop in risk, I think we have a chance to kind of really address this issue. Thank you. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts?
Well, I guess the obvious question, the thing that is the biggest thing that we still haven't been able to solve in all this, how do you get people to exercise and continue to exercise?
Right.
That's the trouble.
Right.
It's not, the data is there. We've been preaching it for 30 years, 40 years. They still don't do it.
Right. I think from our perspective, essentially, our thinking is that we've got to start with the people who are already active. Right? So if someone's kind of taking that first step and has somehow found motivation, like for me, it was the fact that, hey, I'm starting to see my health start to rise, and that might be true for a lot of others. Can we help those individuals who've already taken that first step actually train a bit smarter, right? Put that time and effort they're putting into activity and actually see results very quickly. If they could, humans, end of the day, right, we need to see results quickly. We want gratification. So it's very difficult to convince someone to persist with activity when they don't see results quickly enough. And weight is probably not going to change. That's the reality. That's what we're seeing with activity. So we've got to shift their focus a little bit away from weight as a primary metric, which is because it's easy to measure today, right? It's easy to measure weight. We've kind of had that drilled into our heads. And shift that away and say, actually, all that exercise you're doing probably has had a very good impact on your cardiovascular system and probably improved muscle function. It's not easy to measure today. And so can we get them to kind of see some of that benefit outside of what they are stuck with? So I think that may be one. Second, I think we've got to make it easy. A big part of success will come if exercise becomes something you do 10, 15 minutes a day, 3 to 5 times a week, and you can do it easily at home or at work, and it shouldn't be any different than brushing your teeth or taking a shower, right? It's about the amount of time that we dedicate to those things.
I think specificity has a big influence on how well someone will adhere to something.
Right.
And that's where this is great, because
Exactly.
you get feedback, you have specificity, and the more feedback you get if you're moving in the right direction is a little bit more inspiring.
Right.
And I think in my experience of running the lab for 10 years is people start doing too much too soon, and it becomes uncomfortable. But if you have some sort of metric that says, well, balance it out, and you're actually going a little harder than you need to,
Right.
It doesn't have to be pain and suffering.
Right.
I think that's probably the first, I can benefit from doing lower intensity.
Right.
Or not slugging away on a Stairmaster and things like that.
We have this complimenting. I actually coached someone that you both actually recently we were talking about. She was overtrained, and the results like in 2 weeks from your test to your test was huge. To now to see in the next 2 weeks that I passed, it's already improved another. The FTP went from I think yours 3.8, 4.3, and lately we saw it at Diablo last weekend about 4.5. It was just by doing too much.
Yeah.
So that also decreased her VO2
Right.
dramatically.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting actually when you have,
Again,
in the few cases where we've had longitudinal data like that, like triathletes, for example, starting the training season, like November December, nobody's doing any training, they get it's like very rested period, you get really good score. Like Jan, Feb, March, you get like a peak because training is ramping up. But June, July, sometimes actually you see a decline. So it's interesting because people are kind of putting out too much. And in fact, with athletes, I didn't go into kind of some of the recovery data. It's interesting. So there's a lot of recovery data on the website, but you'll see there isn't recovery. Actually, there is much more variation on recovery for athletes than there is necessarily on VO2 max. And a lot of it is about bringing your peak performance on that day, right? And recovery is a good sign, or the lack of recovery is a good sign that hey, your body actually hasn't had a chance to catch up with all the work and the stress you've subjected it to.
And there's a relationship between recovery.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
So that's essentially how the Revvo works, which is that you just jump on it, create a profile. It guides you through a 15-minute cycling session. So it starts off really gentle, you cycle for 30 seconds, stop 30 seconds, cycle for 30 seconds at a higher target.
Attach the heart monitor? Or?
So you wear a chest strap, so there's a chest strap right there in the pouch, so you wear, usually we use the Polar or the Wahoo 2, and it captures that as well as watts, so it captures energy expenditure directly from the bike. So we have a strain gauge there that measures watts.
Are you selling this, or are you coming in to use it? Or?
So essentially, it's actually a subscription. So the core customers who are using it today are either corporate gyms, so we're in LinkedIn in a couple of locations in Hyatt, and so on. And then in the medical side, we've seen some interest. So University of Arizona, Forward actually, which is a concierge care. So hopefully at some point, actually, your physical could be a VO2 max test if particularly some of the changes that are happening. Particularly the American Heart Association is saying that hey, this is something the doctor should measure. So those are the places that we've seen the greatest interest in this product. So we're still pretty early stage in that, and a lot of energy right now is focused on just getting people to appreciate kind of the value of these metrics, because not everyone does. But for anyone who's interested in doing a test, actually you can just sign up on the website, come back here and do a test. Schedule a time slot, and you can come in and do a test right here. Or we also do free one day on-site test for offices or gyms that are interested in trying that. Any other questions? Cool, great, thank you.